Hi, welcome to RCKicks. On today's show, well, we're going to be building this. Personally, very happy. I had an original one of these a good few years ago.
I'll put a picture of what it should really look like up here or up here. But as you can see, it doesn't come with much.
Yeah, I sold it off, then it went off to America, if I remember correctly. And unfortunately, I was very sad to see it go, as they were very rare back then. And honestly, we really didn't think we were going to see any re-res at all. Well, skip forward a few years and now we have. So I'm so happy to be able to put one back in the collection. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything. So I'll just shut up and we'll crack on, lay it out, and we're going to do a detailed build of this beauty. And this is right up my street. I love these. I think Kyosho is really knocking it out of the park. Anyway, before I just keep waffling on for ages and ages, let's just get this beauty built.
Now, this came out a few months ago and it's been sitting in my build pile for quite a while, but I finally managed to get it to the top. Now, the first thing you have to do is build up the diffs. Now, this kit comes with 2 ball diffs, and I pretty much make a mistake straight away. So keep an eagle eye out and see if you can spot the mistake, and I'll point it out a bit further in the video. Now, I know I said I made a mistake pretty much straight away, but don't let that put you off. Actually, building up ball diffs is not that difficult. You just got to make sure you get all the balls into the actual diff without dropping them over the floor. Now, your friend is ball diff grease, and if you can, get a tray that's got the magnetic aspect to it. That way, you're more likely to keep hold of all your balls. Yeah, and not drop them all over the floor. But don't worry, Kyosho have got you covered. They actually have a special little pack of little bits that you may end up losing. E-clips, ball diff balls, the odd screw, that kind of stuff. So if you ping something across the room and you think, oh no, my build is ruined, don't worry, they might just have come and saved the day. Now, setting the correct tension for your ball diff, well, that depends on what surface you're running on, but in the manual it gives you a good guide of exactly what to do, so read the manual. And if I'd have taken my own advice, maybe I wouldn't have wasted an hour digging back into the kit when I realised the mistake I made. Yeah. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. What are we doing? Oh yeah, building up the gear shaft. Now, there is a lightweight option available, so if you want to burn a bit more cash, well, you can. Right, well, we're almost getting there. Next, we've got to put everything inside the diff housing. Make sure you check that you put all the spacers and all the bearings in, then feed the belt through. It can be a little bit tricky, so make sure it moves nice and freely before you go and close up the clamshell. Now would be a really good time to make sure everything that's supposed to be inside the housing is. Otherwise, later on, you're going to be undoing all these bolts and dismantling it. Now, depending on how far down the build you get, this can take longer than you think. And yes, I am speaking from experience. Now, not all these bolts are the same length, so just double check before you put them in to make sure you've fitted them in the correct location, as I don't think you can damage anything, but it's best to make sure. Another option part that Kyosho manufacture to squeeze a bit more money out of your pockets is a CNC motor mount. So if you want to add a bit more bling to your kit, well, there you go. Now that's done, we can move on to the next step, which is building up the slipper pad. Now there's 2 little washers that need to go in first. When you're putting the pads onto the actual spur, they should clip into place. When you sandwich them between the 2 plates, they need to stay in their correct location. They do tend to slide a little bit, so double check them before you move on to the next step. Setting the slipper to its standard default setting is easy to do, as you just tighten up the screw as per the manual to the distance on the shaft. Obviously, this can be set in situ, as you will adjust this depending on the surface that you're running on. Now, I do have a bit of a gripe. This tower is very thin. I did notice when I was putting the shocks on later on, there's a lot of flex in this part. So I would definitely recommend upgrading it to a carbon version, but also maybe something a little bit thicker, as I wasn't too sold on the amount of movement forward and backwards that you got from this tower.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing pleasure, just to let you know I'm currently running a raffle for a vintage Tamiya for less than a morning coffee, but you're going to have to be quick as it ends within the next 24 hours of this video dropping. So I'll put a link in the description, or you can just Google RCKicks raffles and you can get over there and get yourself a ticket. Some of the profit from that will go to totally free raffles as well, so keep an eye out as every now and again a free raffle pops up where you can get your ticket for nothing. Now so far the amount of people that have entered the current raffle is the lowest I've ever seen, so you could be given the chance to win one for very little money and very good odds. So what are you waiting for? The end of the video, obviously. Sorry about that rude interruption, but we've got to keep the studio lights on somehow, and it's nice to make people's weekends when they win prizes for very little money. Anyway, right, where are we? Okay, we're back to building up the front diff housing. This goes together pretty easy. There's only 3 bolts. Then we attach the front tower. Again, not overly sold on the thickness and the quality of these. They do flex a bit more than I would like. 4 bolts, and that's attached to the housing, and then we can move on. Next, the manual has you putting the pivot pins into the front diff housing. Yep, you push them through after you put the E-clips on the rears. Then we get to look at this beautiful carbon chassis. Absolutely stunning. Now, attaching that to the rear and front diff houses, very easy. There's 4 bolts on the rear, and then we move on to attaching the front. Luckily, Kyosho have included a chassis polycarbonate tray so you can protect that beautiful carbon chassis. Okay, so this is the part where I cover the mistakes that I've made, and I left out these. Yes, the ball diff support rings, both front and rear, so I've had to dig into the front diff and the rear one to slot them in place. Not only that, but later on I realized I actually left out a bearing out of the front and a bearing out of the back. So what you're actually witnessing here is that I've had to stop, open up the diffs, replace the missing parts, put them back together again, and then open them up later on when I've pretty much halfway through built the kit. In my defense, I wasn't feeling very well, and that's what I'm sticking with. Anyway, skipping past my total stupidity, we now have to fit the updated belt cover housing. This is the lower one. These are brilliant. This is a massive upgrade from the original kit. The one that goes on the bottom and then the one that sits on the top deck. Really great idea as it keeps all the gunk out of the belt, which always was a problem back in the day. The vintage ones, you used to have to cut out a bit of polycarbonate and then fit that. These are actually hard plastic and they fit brilliantly. Now, if you're going to be running this versus just leaving it on the shelf, definitely take a few minutes to check that the seals are all joined nicely on both covers, the top deck cover and the lower one, as you want to make sure it clips into place properly, as if you don't and then you run it for the first time and a load of grit gets in there, you're going to have to dismantle it, clean it all out. It will be a nightmare. So just take a little bit of time. Next, we turn our attentions to putting the top deck towers in place. If you're going to be running this, definitely a bit of Loctite here, as these will definitely rattle loose. Next, we need to fit the deck mount. Now, the one in this kit is plastic, boo, but there is beautiful machined ones available at extra cost, obviously. A couple of screws on the side, and then we can move on. I said a couple of screws on the side, and then we could move on. Editor, can you speed this up a little bit? Thank you. Right, now it feels like we're starting to get somewhere, as it's kind of starting to look like a buggy. The next step is to build up the front arms and steering. Kyosho were kind enough to build up the drive shafts for us, so that's going to save us a little bit of time. Don't forget to add that little red spacer in before you put the bearings, as it will be loose without it. The lovely alloy hexes are a nice touch, and the pin that slides through it, all quality stuff. Now, I'm pretty sure you know what I'm going to say. Yes, Kyosho have you covered, and they have some beautiful alloy C-hubs if you want to spend even more money on this kit. Personally, you should get them. They're shiny. Why would you not want to get them? Obviously, you want to put shiny things on your nice buggy. But as I've run out of RC tokens this month, I'm going to stick with the poverty spec plastic C-hubs for now. Well, that's what I'm going to tell the wife anyway.
Moving swiftly on, next is my favourite job of all, turnbuckles. I absolutely adore building turnbuckles, especially the ones that are rock hard and make your fingers hurt after 20 minutes. I'm happy to report that with a little bit of lube, these ones go together nice and easy and don't break your fingers. I would recommend getting some proper tools to do it, as that does help, but these ones you could do with your bare hands and a pair of pliers at a push. Sorry, what's that? You want to make your buggy even lighter? Well, there's no problem. Titanium adjustment rods are available, or tie rods or turnbuckles if you're common. Also, lightweight balls. How can you make them any lighter? They're tiny. Anyway, if you want to spend your money, you can. Yeah, I know. Shut up, Gavin. You've been banging on for ages, and play some bloody music. Yeah, I've also run out of stuff to say because this is the boring bit. We get to the painting in a second, so just stay with us, alright? Bloody hate turnbuckles. What's that? Aluminium hubs, option parts, money? Yeah, they have them too. Do you need them? No. Do you want them? Obviously. And for the eagle-eyed of you that may have noticed that when I put the rear turnbuckles in, I forgot to put the dog bones in. So I had to open them up again to put the dog bones in. So I basically made it front-wheel drive. There's definitely a theme to this video, I just don't know what it is. Now there's quite a few bits and bobs that you need to attach to get the steering to work properly. So when you're building it up, make sure every shim is in the right place. Otherwise you don't want any binding. If for some weird reason when you screw it to the chassis you have some kind of binding, you messed it up. So best to go back and check it. When it comes to the steering mounting bolts, make sure you use Loctite, definitely needed. Otherwise, after a few runs, the steering's going to get all sloppy, and if you're halfway through a vintage race, yeah, it's not going to end well. Okay, so now we've made it to building up the shocks. These are pretty straightforward, even though a little bit weird if you're used to modern shocks, as these are kind of upside down. Not as in upside down as the way you fit them to the chassis, as in the way you fill them up. Right, I thought I'd throw a servo into this, as I don't like the steering flopping around on any of my shelf queens. Now you're probably wondering, why am I putting a race servo in this? And the reason is, I think I've stuffed up the firmware on this, as when I turn it on it just spins round and round and round, and I've tried my best to get the firmware sorted on it and I've just had no luck. So it will just go into this shelf queen and stop the steering flapping around. Now this is the thing I'm not overly sold on, this top deck. I do talk about this a bit later on, but look, why have you got a beautiful carbon chassis and then not a carbon top deck? Because it's an optional extra that costs more money. Anyway, I'm not going to go over it in too much detail, as I'll talk about it at the end of the video. Right, then we get the new dust cover over the top of the belt. Really like this. I think that was a really good upgrade that they did. It fits nicely. Now I use an Allen key just to line it up, as there is a dust cover that goes underneath and it is a little bit fiddly. So to get the screws in, be a bit careful. You don't want to crack this top or the bottom cover when you're putting the screws through. So just go a bit easy. I wouldn't recommend using an electric screwdriver to attach the dust covers. Also, if you do forget, like I did, this rubber bung mount thing bit that goes in, you can fit it afterwards, so you don't have to take the whole dust cover off again. You can add it later. As I panicked when I just fitted everything, realised that I hadn't put that little rubber dust cover in, and thought I was going to have to do just that. Now I had a vintage Kyosho motor lying around, so I thought I'd throw it in the car as well, just because, I guess. Right, we're on the home straight, just the pinion and spur cover to fit, and then we can attach the rear shock again. You have to disconnect that to have access. Next, we just put the battery mounts in. Now this is a slightly weird way. Obviously the original car had cells, so they've modified it so you can actually put a more modern battery in it. Just 2 screws underneath and then you can move on to fitting the fancy Kyosho branded battery straps. Snazzy they are. Next is the spoiler mount, and I got this wrong 3 times, so pay attention to it. Don't be like me. Yeah, I actually screwed them on the wrong way round, as they go inwards, not outwards. I was in a lot of pain at the time and I wasn't feeling great. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to all of it. Now we've just got to fit it to the actual car. 2 long bolts will go all the way through and screw it tight to the rear diff housing. Now you've got to be a bit careful, because if this snaps off, it can snap the rear diff housing. I had a vintage one that exact thing happened, and then you got to replace the diff housing. Now we move on to the fun part where the car starts to come together, and that's getting the wheels and tyres on it. Massive thanks to Marwan for sending over these gorgeous tyres. These used to be like hen's teeth if you ever tried to restore a Kyosho mid before the Riris came out. And they look great. Now I've used Marwan tyres for a long time, so I have some buggies that have got Marwan tyres for about 4 years. So they do hold up to sitting on the shelf or being driven. They're not just for looks, they do actually function. Now the rear spoiler on the re-release obviously is a hard plastic one, which is different to the original one, as that was just a standard polycarbonate one. Now I'm going a little bit off-piste here with the stickers, as I do all my Kyosho re-releases, and I use the cartoon of the car and I fit it onto the wings so mine all match. Your mileage might vary, do whatever you want, it's your car, but I think it looks rather spiffy. Now we turn our attention to cutting out the lower tray. This is pretty straightforward stuff, it shouldn't take very long. Now you can do this black, I guess, or you can leave it clear if you want to show off that fancy carbon chassis. I'm just going to paint it white as per the instructions. One thing I did find that was a little bit weird is the way that you actually bolt it to the chassis. Now normally you have a couple of bolts at the front, some at the rear, but in this version there's only 2 mounting points that go through the chassis, and then there's like a plastic cap that goes on the inside of the chassis. Little bit odd. Then there's 2 screws that go right at the back of the tray, and then the front just tucks into the bumper. Now I can't say I'm overly sold on the way that it mounts on the 2 parts that you see here. It's just a little bit fiddly, as those little mounts that are on the inside have to kind of clip through the chassis, and then there's a little arm that sort of sticks over. Now obviously it does work, and the idea is that you can turn them and then just pop them out, but I'm sure there is a better way of doing it. And finally, last but not least, we can turn our attentions to the body. Luckily, this is pretty straightforward body. It's not overly complicated. Cutting it out is a bit difficult. There's lots of weird and wonderful little bits that you've got to cut out to get it to sit around the diff housing. But painting wise, there's basically 2 colors. There's just the white, obviously if you go in box art, and then there's the black bit that goes around the rear section. Now, in the instructions, they want you to spray the black on the outside, not on the inside. Personally, if I was feeling a little bit better, I would have actually painted it on the inside. But as I just needed to get it finished by now, I just carried on and did it as per the manual. To the Kyosho engineer who thought it was a brilliant idea to have body post holes square, thanks very much, as a round hole takes all of about a minute. 2 square holes take the best part of half an hour. So thanks for that. Now there's a glaring obvious mistake that I'm making here. Can you guess what it is? For some random reason, I thought I would spray the black first. Whereas in the manual, they say spray the car white first and then do the black second. 100% do it that way. And the reason, the biggest reason, is if you get any black overspray on the inside of the body, it will show when you paint it white. Luckily I got away with it. I don't know what I was thinking and why I ended up doing it this way, as it just made it 10 times more difficult for me, as I then had to go back and protect the black. Just put the window masks in, paint it white. Once you've painted it white, then do the black that you see here. I don't know what's wrong with me, but for this build, it's definitely a trend. Anywho, skipping past that, I mean, it looks good, but don't do that. I had to cover it up, obviously, as I didn't want to get any white in it. Now, a lot of people comment and ask me, how do I then paint it black on the inside if I'm using a light color, especially white? Well, like you've just seen, I use silver. So I'll put down about 4 layers of white. You want a good level of white on it first. Then I use light silver if I've got it. Now I was planning on maybe doing the inside gold to kind of match the shocks that are on the car, but I only had a little bit left, so I attempted to do it gold on the inside and it didn't really work. So then I backed it in black just like normal. Another little tip for you, obviously you can use the stickers that you get with the kit for the windows, but I find that when you fit them to the windows, they look a bit naff. Now you can use the water technique, which will help keep the air out of the window, but I find it's better just to use PS smoke, blow 3 to 4 layers of smoke, then just cut around the edge of the window decal and then just fit that. Can be a little bit fiddly, but it just looks much nicer than using the stickers, as a lot of the times you use the window stickers, you get a lot of air bubbles in them and they just look rubbish. Last but not least, we're going to fit the decals. I do struggle with decals that are cut for you. I talk about that a bit later on at the end, but I just struggle, as lining them up when they're totally cut out for you is just difficult. I find it much harder than just cutting the decals out myself, but hey, I managed to line them all up. And that, my friends, is how you build a Turbo Optima Mid Special from Kyosho. Mwah.
This is my 3rd attempt at the ending, so please bear with me. I'm in a bit of pain. I've actually been under the weather. I got COVID again, and then I was just exhausted through the build. Made quite a few mistakes, if I'm honest. And then I spent ages coughing to the point where I put my back out, so I'm in a bit of pain. And I sneezed earlier and I thought I was going to die. Anyway, the joys of getting old. The build itself, lovely, just like what you'd expect if you've built a Kyosho Vintage Series car before. If you haven't built a Kyosho and you're a Tamiya fan, definitely give one a go. You'll be surprised just how good they are. And I know you look at the price and you go, oh, that's a lot more expensive. Trust me, it's definitely worth it. The only thing I wish that they'd actually done is that top deck definitely needs to be in carbon to match the beautiful bottom chassis. So yes, you can get aftermarket ones, but it's going to not look the same, as the weave is going to be different. So I'm going to pick up the Kyosho one. I think it's like 50 odd pound. So I will do that, but I'll do that off camera. Bit of a shame. Would have liked to have seen that in the actual kit. But obviously, if you're going to be out racing, then it's not really going to make much difference to you. And if you're going to go vintage racing and you're thinking about Kyosho, this is probably the one to go for, as it's kind of the peak of the mids before they moved into the lasers. So yeah, putting the decals on, very easy, not that much to it. One thing I probably would do is I would try and cut the bottom of the body a little bit lower. Just a fraction lower than the line, as it looks a bit high, and I've pushed it down as far as I can. Apart from that, massive thanks to Marwan for supplying the tyres. As I am a Shelf Queen lover, having the correct vintage tyres really does make it look the part. Obviously the rear spoiler is different, as that's a hard plastic versus a polycarbonate one, but if you change that, I don't think you're really going to notice, apart from the shocks having threads on them versus the original ones didn't. But definitely happy to have it in the collection after letting a vintage one go. So if you made it to the end of the video, massive thanks very much. And the cool thing about having this back is I now have the little baby one to go with the 1/10, and this is the little baby one that I did NRC projects a while ago, and I put it in the same livery as the Toms. If you'd like to see the build video of this little fella, and it is a scale replica, I'll put a link up here, go check it out. Thanks very much for watching, bye bye.